Hi, everybody. Today I'm taking a closer look at beginner strategies for Japan when playing the very popular Global 1940 edition of Axis and Allies. And it's nice to see a ton of interest in this version of ANA. Now, in playing the Japan side, I think it can seem quite overwhelming to new players for at least a couple of reasons. I still remember the feeling I had when I first laid eyes on the 2001 Pacific version of ANA, a much smaller game, but still the Japanese initial setup being similar to this one in that it seems like a giant mess of units just to look at. So, how do you make sense of all of it, considering that the side you're going to be playing is utterly surrounded by enemies? And despite being well stocked with units to start, your economy is still dwarfed by the combined power of the nations looking to pull you down. So, what are the right moves to make? Where do you begin? Obviously, time is going to be Japan's enemy, being short economic power. Japan can't really afford to rack up poor decisions in this game, despite looking absolutely stacked to start off. It's understandable that someone new to Global 1940 would feel hesitant to try Japan, especially against very experienced opponents. So, with this video, I hope to provide new players with a few helpful tips and strategies that will allow them to be competitive in, I think, any game group. So, I think playing Japan one way very effectively, perhaps optimally, requires a special mindset that I call the slow burn mentality. So, just hear me out on this one, because on the surface, it seems to contradict the obvious imperative of having to attack as quickly as possible in every direction before the American tidal wave washes up on your shores. But instead, I say let's slow things down. Let's be careful and considered. Let's break down exactly what Japan needs to accomplish on a turn by turn basis in the simplest terms possible. So we can actually make sense of all the problems faced by Imperial Japan in this game. It is the easiest way to overcome, I think, all the threats with minimal risk. Okay, so issue one is that Japan starts something like minus 26 IPCs economy to the United States, and they need to gain that amount and capture territories in two turns, or they will be dead in short order. Period. What was Japan's biggest problem in the Second World War? Arguably that it could not make good its combat losses at the same rate as the West. It was a country of like 80 million versus a combined Western alliance of 200 plus million. And Japan was not an industrial giant in the way that the West was. So the only way to alter the balance of power in this game in any meaningful way that is helpful in the long run to the Japanese war effort is to focus on the Money Islands in the South Pacific, where it was believed Japan could capture a magical supply of oil as well as unlimited amounts of other strategic resources or whatever. And it was an astonishing gamble, one of many the Japanese have to take if they hope to win in this game. Now, of course, there's a problem right off the bat because it is customary in most game groups to limit Japan on turn one for game balancing purposes to only attacking China and French Indochina. You also see adjusted initial British setups that move transports out of harm's way. And, these are reasonable. I'll play with them too. However, I argue as Japan, you can't let this restriction cloud or confuse your short term objectives, which must be the Philippines, Borneo, Celebes on turn two at the latest. And I know what you're saying. Yeah, but what about China? Well, I say, what about it? The war in China isn't going anywhere. And this is how I differ from a lot of other Axis players. Given the turn one restriction, many people will try to overslam the Chinese with everything on turn one since they aren't allowed to hit anywhere else. In its worst form, the China campaign involves stripping the IJN of its naval air power to join in the assault or slaughter, whatever you want to call it. I say this is inadvisable. It's better to set up for the Money Island campaign on the next turn. I argue there isn't a Chinese province in the game that's worth losing even a single Japanese aircraft over. And I'm not saying don't attack China on turn one What I'm saying is take only what is given to you by the Allies and nothing more before you seize the Money Island group. You should try to take Chinese territories with 1 infantry left in the conquered territory. I'd cheap out in this theater of operation to start. It can wait. Risk no aircraft in China ever. In fact, I pull all the true fighters out of East Asia to start because every turn I build an aircraft carrier, and as the Japanese, you already have enough extra fighters to drop on the first 3 or so new carriers you can build, 1 each turn at the start of the game. So you take advantage of this situation, it will pay dividends later. The TAC bombers can remain in China, however. So turn 2 can be another problem for the Japanese player. Once again, you can get into a lot of trouble trying to do way too much here. Some people attack everything, and I mean everything. Alaska, other stuff. I think the max possible result might be something like 18 IPCs worth of territories on the first turn while being at war with the West. This, I think, is reckless and wasteful in the long run, since some of these spots can't be held for long and will be immediately counterattacked. So take what you need and can hold on turn 2, and then simply take the other half on turn 3. It's preferable to do it this way. You need to keep losses at a minimum at the start of the game. Pearl Harbor, if you're a new player, you'll probably be thinking, oh man, I have to Pearl, let's strike the morally inferior United States, and let's have the US Pacific Fleet reeling at the start of a full-blown war. It's not necessary, not at this moment. You have to let this moment pass and ask yourself, how does the raid directly help Japan's ability to replace its combat losses? And this is the underlying problem that must be addressed before any cataclysmic confrontation is allowed to happen with the United States. By turn 3, it's going to be Java, Sumatra, Malaya, or bust. You may call upon even more sacrifice here. Suicide transports, one-way transports if necessary. You don't want to make this a habit, though. It could actually cost you the game in the long run. But in this case, it's warranted. You always keep an eye on the U.S. Pacific Fleet. It shouldn't be strong enough on turn 3 to seriously threaten Japan. The IJN should still have air superiority and carrier advantage, provided you built one every turn to start the game. And at this very moment, after the fall of the Big Islands, Japan becomes the equal of the United States in size and power in this version of history. Overall, the Allies still make more total IPCs, but Japan can't be bullied by the American player anymore. They have a bigger navy. They have an equally robust economy. Japan's decision tree at this point will branch in directions that are difficult to predict. What they have to do will depend on what the Allies do in the Pacific Fleet from this point forward. So unless the Americans choose to move into the Sea of Japan, why not help convince the Allies of Japan's invincibility by eradicating any ragtag Anglo-Anzac Navy near India? And this is important because it prevents the West from retaking these valuable islands while Japan's back is turned. So go ahead and smash this fleet. And at this point, I would say this game is a battle for survival for the West, because they're in major trouble. Once the British Anzac fleet is destroyed, you can fake out the British player fairly easily with a bit of propaganda or psychological warfare. I always face this type of stuff when I play buddies head to head. I don't usually do it myself a lot, but anyway, what you can do is you can pick up and count the units in India at this point, make the British player think that you're considering an all or nothing attack into that territory. Like you're willing to sacrifice all your naval air power to eliminate the British early. And you have to think, what has to be the British player's response? Because they don't know that you're bluffing. Most players will contract the British units into a ball in India for defensive purposes. Really, what other choice do they have? So this overreaction is usually worth a few territories for Japan. Maybe Shan State, Siam. But they don't know that you're really not willing to risk naval air power over India at this point. Me, I say hell no. Other players of Japan will try this, and I think it wrecks their game, but not me because I think it's too risky. It's remember we're talking about a slow burn here. Um, at this point, your overall concern is to maintain the integrity of the IJN, and this is going to be your new priority. And now, finally, this is also the time to deal with China, the endless, frustrating war in China. Build a factory in Manchuria, but don't do what a lot of other people do, which is, tanks, 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 tanks. I say no, 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 no. You need to soak hits in China as effectively as possible. So I go with maybe a 3.5 to 4 to 1 ratio mechanized infantry to tanks. And you'll see profit from this strategy. Satisfaction guaranteed. So China melts in 3, 4, 5 turns, maybe. Moving from north to south, you will probably see a bit of retaking the southern territories out of British India at this point. But it really doesn't matter because you're slowly squeezing the Chinese from the north, and you will get to uh, India eventually. And at this point, you still always have to count aircraft carriers. America can never be allowed to significantly gap the Japanese in this category. And you have to remember a carrier is not a real carrier unless it is fully equipped with two naval fighters and it is attached to a viable strike task force. And why do I say this? Because consider what happened in real life. The Japanese had a handful of aircraft carriers late war that did absolutely nothing. They were utterly wasted because they were either, well, I don't know, they weren't finished partially, and or they had no experienced air crews, or they were dispersed and not attached to any main body or strike group. So, for example, Yamato's converted second sister, Shinano. Another one was called the Taiho, for example. And there's, I think, a couple more. And this style of wastage will happen in your ANA game as well if you disperse your navy. And another thing, a lot of players of Japan overlook with respect to fleet management is the importance of submarines. And these are the best way to soak hits. And if you're lucky, they can pack a punch in battle also. So in a showdown with the US as Japan, I want 6 subs in a strike group as a minimum. And most people just ignore the submarines, I find. So while the war in China proceeds in earnest, drive the IJN around the Pacific in a threatening manner in such a way as to provoke the American player into attacking at unfavorable odds. If China is dying and the big islands are lost, then America at some point is going to try a desperate throw to stave off defeat. Um, and that's basically the setup for, I think, the best winning strategy, the easiest and simplest and most straightforward winning strategy for Japan. Um, so at this point, yeah, I'll just reiterate that China has to be defeated first, and then India, and not before. So once you take the large islands, it is a big mistake, I think, to take too many losses to try and knock out India immediately before you deal with China. So I'll just give you the cliff notes before we go to some more play-by-play. On turn 1, if you're playing with restrictions, it's a token effort in China. And then on turn 2, you should attack the upper big island group. The next turn, it's the lower big island group. Secure those territories. Next, you hunt the Anglo-Anzac fleet. And if you're lucky, you can do that successfully and build a factory in Manchuria on around turn 3 or 4 at the latest. And then it's the slow march through China to India. And at that point, you can make the argument for the other players at the table that they find themselves at this point in a non-recoverable situation because you have more money at this point than the allies combined and your navy is intact and you can position your navy in such a way if you're careful that you always force well you're going to have to force the Americans to attack you and that's always more difficult because the navies defend better than they attack and yeah that's a wrap for the Japanese in this game. Now I'm not saying this is the only strategy. I think it's one way to win as the Japanese. It is incredibly difficult to defeat. But you always have to keep in mind that with the amount of dice rolling in Axis and Allies, anything is possible. Like when and if the Americans do decide to attack you, and I know who knows, maybe you just get horrendous luck in like a giant naval confrontation, then that can tip the scales momentarily. However, at least you'll have an equal economy, so you should be able to like rebuild your losses at the same rate as the Americans. So we'll just take a closer look specifically at what's going on here at turn 2. Yeah, see, a lot of veterans I find of Global 1940 who play Japan, I'm not sure why, but it's like this contest amongst them to maybe compete for like this magical strategy to defeat China in the least amount of moves possible. And that's interesting and everything. And I guess you can arrive at that answer through the sum of many individual set piece battle odds calculations. It's kind of like science it out, like, oh, on J1 I'm going to attack into this zone with these pieces and this will give me this amount of odds and what I should I mean, I don't know. I just don't play with the battle odds calculator. Old school here, so you can usually just go by feel. And anyway, yeah, I don't, that whole competition about like rushing China and India out of the game the quickest and most efficiently. Although interesting, I still find it more risky and dangerous than the slow burn mentality, which utterly minimizes all potential risk to the Japanese. Like you just, as weird as it sounds, you don't have to rush anything except the seizure of the main island group, which levels the playing field in terms of economic power. But once that is accomplished and you are responsible with your navy and always have like very strong task forces that can't be overwhelmed and ambushed, yeah, you're going to arrive at the same place as any other battle strategy, grand strategy that claims to be potentially more efficient or more sort of shocking or I guess blitzkrieg like, for lack of a better term. It just, and I think, yeah, those strategies only increase your the potential of something from going wrong. If you're rushing things and risking your aircraft unnecessarily, one huge unlucky die roll could swing the balance of power against you. And yeah, you just don't want to have to deal with that type of BS that could happen in ANA. So why not? Yeah, why not just move slowly or more slowly? And I think also if you are playing as a true global scenario, like the European map is stuck on the left hand side of this one, and you have like a German ally. I think the slow burn approach might be more desirable, even more desirable, because Japan is definitely going to stick around longer, deeper into the game, and every single turn that it's a threat is going to divert more resources from the more important European theater to the Pacific, and that comes at a great detriment to the U.S. Contribution in Europe. Same with the British. If they wind up losing everything in the Pacific, they're going to be weak as well everywhere. So the more time the Japanese war effort is viable and threatening, it seems like that would be a greater benefit to potential German ally, I would think, because nothing's worse as the German player if all of a sudden you see like some spectacular defeat of Japanese forces in the Pacific, and then all of a sudden they're adopting an all-out defensive posture, and that whole half of the war can be put on the back burner while all the lion's share of Allied resources flood into Western Europe. Like that's not going to happen if you play Japan this way in the Pacific. Like the Americans will be, well, they will have to actually build aircraft carriers every turn, and at least, and that's something. They have to then construct a main body of transports and a landing force that can tail their strike groups if they ever hope to take back some of these IPCs from the Axis. But yeah, there's a way to the Americans can deal with this. I actually covered that in an earlier video, but it's not a sure thing. But anyways, so in this game you can see. I mean, I cranked the difficulty setting of the computer up to maximum. But what you see here, like I don't think any human player is going to be able to do much different. The I noticed that American AI is fairly timid with the Pacific Fleet, but if you think about it, there's a reason, because the computer isn't can't take really, if it's just like going by odds and stuff like that. It's not going to take reckless gambles early on. So it has to do the sensible thing with respect to like calculating success rates and stuff like that. So they, when faced with this strategy, you see an American AI, it does not charge into the Sea of Japan, where it can be like overwhelmed with aircraft and attacked by my navy, and then wiped out. They usually will withdraw to Hawaii, or even further east, and just build up until they have naval parity with Japan. And they'll also buy a lot of bombers and station them around the little islands. So you have to be careful with the Japanese after you mop up the necessary island IPCs. You can't just charge after the like blindly after the American Navy. It has to be. You can see a huge concentration in Wake Island there, um, and they'll have bombers in airports stationed within sort of counter striking range. So all of that you have to be mindful of. You can't just blunder into a situation. But on the other hand, yeah, once the British fleet is taken care of south of India, it's time to move into the slot, so to speak, and at least threaten the Americans. At least be in the Philippines, where if the Americans do decide to sail into the Sea of Japan, you can get there on the well. You can hit them with everything. Your entire navy, every land-based aircraft in Japan, and probably even TAC bombers in coastal China. It's it's usually very, very, very destructive proposition for the Americans to do that early war. It will most likely mean losing their entire Pacific fleet and then having to rebuild. And it's almost like, so what at that point, if you're the Japanese and you're just as strong as the Americans, even if it's a straight up exchange, it's probably at that point it's still probably to Japan's advantage, because it takes more time for the Americans to reconstruct their Pacific fleet, sail it across the Pacific Ocean, and start, being offensive with it. Like you're as strong as the Americans at that point, and your new ships go right into the Sea of Japan. So very tough situation. Here we see, yeah, the poor old suicide one-way transports. Don't like doing that, obviously, but if it means securing Sumatra or Java, then it's acceptable. You just, like I said before, don't get in a habit of, and I actually struggle with that as an old school Axis and Allies player, because we're not used to the airfields that give the bombers the extra space, or uh, I think transports that don't get defense, like they don't have the, yeah, they don't have the one on a 1d6 defensive roll. It's very difficult to get used to. You can see I'm buying subs. Like I said, those will form up with my main strike task forces. Um, right now, I consider, yeah, my navy under strength in submarines, and I have to fix that problem. We can take a quick look at the production and IPCs. So, and also, like I said, every turn you're counting aircraft carriers. We've got four. I think the Americans have four. Um, we'll have five. For because, like I said, you buy aircraft carriers one every single turn until you run out of available naval fighters to put them on, and then you build fighters, and then another aircraft carrier. It's never a mistake building a. I maintain that there. Like, I mean, at least this is one thing that this game gets right from my historical perspective, right? Like, it's the carriers. The carriers are king in the Pacific War, in the Second World War, for the first time in history. It was the big uh, change. It was the big development. Every war has that weird thing where something new changes, like the balance. It changes everything, and you could say, yeah, the Pacific War was remarkable because finally the aircraft carriers replaced the battleships as what, what was going to be the measured, I guess, the power of nations. Um, but yeah, every single war is like that. If you notice, when I was a kid, this is a bit off topic, but I still remember it. Is like when America went into the Gulf War, like Gulf War One. What was the incredible new shocking development? Well, for me, it was those attack helicopters. Those, I've never seen anything like that before. It was those things were incredible what they could do. You could remember like the FLIR footage where like there'd be an Iraqi like soldier, and then like the box would go like no, 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 on top, like over it, and then yeah, the 30 millimeter cannons just like did their thing, killing tanks and everything. So, and then the latest one, like in Ukraine, of course, it's the rise of the drones. That drone warfare like has changed the face of the battlefield. To the same degree, you could say like the attack helicopters changed it in the Gulf War, and the rise of the aircraft carriers altered the balance of power in the Pacific in the Second World War. Anyway, back to the game, back to the regularly scheduled program. You can see here the Anzacs did a really devious thing. They put that destroyer in the Sumatra Sea zone, which blocks me from uh, reaching the remnants of the Anglo-Anzac fleet at the extreme bottom left corner of the map. Um, but it's not like I'm going to alter my plan because of it. It was a very smart delaying tactic. I have to destroy that destroyer, and then proceed with the regular plan of attack. So, yep, more aircraft carriers are coming. Japan starts this game with just a ridiculous amount of aircraft. Uh, it's just crazy. But, I mean, I think that the designers got one thing, well, not more than one thing, but at least they made Japan fairly deficient in its economic power to sort of compensate for like this massive inventory of weapons and stuff they have to start this. Of course, there's no game. There's nothing gameable if it's anything less. I would say, right? You have to have a realistic chance with the Japanese. Otherwise, it's not fun. So I kind of understand the ahistorical buffing of the Japanese and all of these specific versions of Axis and Allies. But yeah, so that seems like overkill. Of course, it's overkill, but it's important to keep your navy together, your strike groups together. 4 aircraft carriers, which is enough to deal with undersized Anglo-Anglo navy. Yep, moving stuff into French Indochina. Anytime actually you play like in any version of Axis and Allies where I don't know, maybe you're playing America, maybe you're playing Japan, any situation where you have two, like it seems like you just have an embarrassment of choices, like you have so much money to spend. It's um so easy to be reckless with your spending. So that's like a big temptation that a lot of people, players of Axis and Allies, have to overcome. And that temptation, of course, usually looks like just, you know, bombers, bombers, bombers. It's so lazy. um, Although, I mean, it can't, in the older versions, the strategic bombing can work. There's no doubt about it. Um, but I mean, the revised kind of nerfed the heavy bombers a little bit. 2d6. It's probably more sensible. I don't know what you guys think of Mongolia and Russia in this map. I don't. I just ignore it. I don't know. I've never felt the need to even think twice about those territories, attacking them or just ignore them. So lots of money to spend with Japan. Get your tanks going for Manchuria, of course. Aircraft carrier. Still have $30. Uh, can never go wrong with transports. Um, that's another thing, though. Uh, I know a way that I personally tighten up my gameplay is to take better care of my transports because I just get lazy with them. Leave them hanging, and all of a sudden one bomber appears and they're they're all taken off the board. And if you think about it, it only takes like a few, and that's like 24 IPCs or whatever, 21 or whatever it is they are in this game. They used to be 8. I know that. 7 maybe in this. I don't know. Yeah, uh, China's definitely a quagmire. Um, It's just I find it just a huge mistake to get too committed to the war in China in the first few turns when obviously you need more expensive captured territories to be on an equal footing with the West. Um, of course, you have the temptation of Hunan, like striking deep enough to cut the Burma Road, which prevents, I think, the Chinese from building artillery. You can see here I'm about to eliminate the Anglo-Anzac fleet on this turn. Um, and then it's like I said, it's kind of a slog, slow burn, slow squeeze of China from the north with ground units. Not necessarily all tanks, like a lot of people do. They get tank happy, impatient, and that costs money in this game. Um, yeah, the I think probably I'm not sure I've seen a lot of allies players do this, but you could make the argument that the best thing for the British to do with their navy is just to run as fast as they can south of Australia, maybe with all their naval units, and wait for um, American help. I don't see any profit from using it as like a speed bump early in the war like this. I mean, that's why do something like this? That's crazy. And I love how the computer defaults. You know, you trying to take hits on your aircraft carrier so that your planes can't land. Okay, yeah, whatever. That's sneaky. That's what subs are for, and battleships. Um, Taking hits on aircraft carriers, no thanks. That I would rather I'd actually rather lose destroyers, I think, than take hits on my aircraft carriers because they have to be locked and loaded and ready to go at any moment's time, as far as I'm concerned. If I'm the Japanese admiral, they can't never be in a unready state. So there you go. There's the demise of the British Navy in the Pacific. This move here from Hunan into Burma is a feint because the main effort is going to originate from Manchuria and sweep south. Um, it's just I would never, knowing what I know about how most allies sort of play Pacific, I would never consider wasting naval resources attacking India before the fall of China. I would rather slowly squeeze China. I'll gladly accomplish exactly what some of the more efficient, faster, riskier Japanese strategies can accomplish, like maybe 4 or 5 turns later, if it means that I have zero risk of denuding, weakening, or threatening the integrity of the IJN. It's, I don't know. I can't play any other way. It's I guess more boring, less panache, but who cares? It's, as the American player, you're gonna attack Japan. You're gonna face, five, six, seven carriers with like up to 14 fighters. And, it's, you better have more than that. That's all I have to say. I don't know what you're expected to bring, but it can't be 1-to-1 odds. Or the ratio of ships can't be 1-to-1 because I know I defend a lot better. So, and how long, like, are you going to wait? Well, if you've waited till this point, it may be too late. So, if you think about it, the Americans in the West can really be between a rock and a hard place here. It is doable. There's no doubt about it. I think I showed the solution to this, potentially, like it's one possibility. I'm just saying, like, remember the intent of this video is to allow for or demonstrate a strategy that will allow a new player of Japan in Pacific 40 to be extremely competitive. No more fear of being overwhelmed or being intimidated. Like, oh, I don't want to play Japan in a multiplayer opposed game of Global 1940 because I don't want to screw up and then wreck the game for my German ally. Well, no. You don't have to worry about that. If you play this way, if the Axis wind up losing the war, it's probably not going to be your fault. That I can almost guarantee. So you see, this is just a fairly typical build. Spread of units, another carrier, 2 subs. I noticed the one unit I don't buy a lot of as Japan in Pacific 1940 are the artillery. I don't know. Nothing wrong with them. But I don't know. I find the mechanized infantry a lot more useful. Pair them up with the tank, get blitz, use your attack bombers. They're pretty good. They're a pretty good alternative to just like the slower artillery. But that's just me. To move those planes out of Hope High, like you never give the Chinese a chance to damage Japanese aircraft. Like to me, that's unacceptable. There's one exception, I suppose. If you're about to knock China completely out of the war for good, then, and it means perhaps taking a couple of attack bomber losses to do that, then okay. But that's the only situation I'm willing to entertain. Japanese aircraft losses in that context. Yeah, see, like I said, you take what the Chinese give you. Obviously, they're going to leave empty territories open. You move in with one. Take what they give you. Don't give anything away for free. Also, so you always want to have at least one unit in any territory, so you don't get blitzed through. You can see the American Navy is five. No, it's smaller. It looks it's the U.S. player has done well to amass um, a giant task force. I think it's in. Well, it's not even in Hawaii. It's in the Carolines, maybe, or sorry, Wake. Um, and they have five carriers, but I have more. The IJN is still bigger, although it's split in two spots. It won't be. Once you dispose of the Anglo Anzac Navy south of India, I don't see much reason for the Japanese to split their Pacific Fleet. So I will form that back up into one giant fleet. And my favorite spot to base that out of is the Philippines. Um, we'll see. We'll see how aggressive the Americans are. Certainly at the point now where they could consider limited offensive operations. Well, I mean, not even limited. They should be able to strike the Japanese because I mean, I'm out of position, right? It takes effort to uh, accomplish what you see here, and that will run the at least a portion of the IJN like way out of position. But it's like I said, it's temporary, and the three equipped carriers that you see there, well, it's soon to be four. I would move that actually out of harm's way, but Wake I think is just an airfield. It's not a port, so it's still safe. You always have to be mindful of ranges like that too. Aircraft carrier numbers and uh, where they can reach, where those task forces can reach. If the U.S. Pacific Fleet switch it rebases to a port, I will obviously have to um, redeploy my navy like very carefully. So we'll see what they do on this turn. I mean, I have more units coming, so although out of position, I'm still like even half of the IJN is no pushover for the entire U.S. Pacific Fleet, and they have their main body um, in the same sea zone as their strike group, which is risky. Not sure what they're going to do. I say they'd probably attack somewhere. Carolines, maybe? They have the power to be offensive at this point, so Japan has to be careful. Took the Marshalls. That's weird. No, Caroline. They took the Caroline Islands. Yeah, figured as much. Only with a splinter, a splinter task force. But those are. I guess they're going to move their whole navy there. That's interesting. So now, yeah, you can see the game is basically afoot here. this is where it sort of becomes a chess match between the U.S. and Japan. So we'll see if we could get the Americans to attack me at a statistical disadvantage here. That's going to be the key. Because honestly, China is shrinking, and the British are bottled up outside of India and Burma. Now, it's not uncommon for the British to sort of make a little comeback while you're occupied finishing off China. So you expect that. But what's going to happen when you don't have to worry about China anymore? Like, everything is just going to flood south, and you'll be able to roll the British up like a carpet right back into India, and then eventually, like, right off the board. I've got to get the bulk of the IJN out of Malaya and back to the Philippines, it looks like. Americans are ready to strike. So if I put my entire navy in the Philippines, that's going to be 8 carriers. They're going to be under strength. Because I don't have the full complement of the naval fighters, which is not good. But I'll have to fix that by next turn. So it's going to be 8 carriers versus 6, maybe. Have the advantage. 5. But who knows how many aircraft he has in range. So if you think about it, if America attacks me in the Philippines at this point, which is okay, I mean, that's an acceptable outcome for Japan. We'll be attacking at a statistical disadvantage. And even if it results in some sort of massive exchange, like fairly even exchange, who does that benefit? I would argue at this point, incredibly, it's Japan that comes out ahead, because I'm involved with a war in China where I can just pour land resources in, and that's long term in this game. That's unwinnable for China. So I will continue to grow in strength, and we will both be able to slowly rebuild our navies. And yes, I have to fund an expensive land campaign in China. However, the Americans have to build a transport fleet and an invasion fleet. So you both have other problems to worry about. It's not as simple as just like starting over. And there's a ton of Allied aircraft trapped in China now. I guess 1, 2, 3. They can get back to Burma, maybe. That's always dangerous. As the Allies, I don't like to send my fighters into China. Not British fighters, not that many anyway. Once again, you just, slowly chip away at the Chinese. It's progress. It's slow. It's painful. But it's inevitable. They just don't have the ability to build like Japan does in this game, even with all their free infantry deploys. It's not enough. So should be close to finishing off China this turn. We'll see if the British Air Force sticks around. I am guessing they will not. But we'll see. Oh, wow. Lost that one. That's disappointing. China down to 2 spots. And they're at 55, 67, 72. Yeah, I'm still being outproduced by the Allies in total, but not by much. Not by much. And it doesn't matter because if you fight this way with Japan, you're really sort of isolating your opponents from each other, so they can't cooperate closely anymore, not easily. British are kind of all out defensive mode, trying to protect India. China likewise trying to hold on to anything that they can. And America trying to find any type of opening to exploit. But in the Pacific, I'm their equal on the seas, so I don't think they can't very well attack Japan proper and hope to hold it. See what America does here. Turn 7. I'm sure there's some people watching this video right now saying, oh, if this was me, I would have India and China by now. Maybe. Would you have 8 aircraft carriers and a giant task force like I have in the Philippines? I don't know. I have like 16 fighters and 8 aircraft carriers. Wow, are the British really willing to sacrifice their air force now? They're going to stand in Burma as opposed to China. And like I don't know if I said this before, but as soon as we get to a condition that I would say is close to non-recoverable by the Allies, well, I'll just start, like fast forwarding and skipping stuff. Because, we could almost do that now. What does it look like when China goes down? What does it look like when India collapses? Then the only thing left after that is to defeat the American Pacific Fleet. And then it's over. It doesn't matter. Like if America is reduced to, well, it will be reduced to maybe Hawaii, Alaska, whatever. Um, Australia is not strong enough to make any sort of difference. If Japan has all of China, all of India, the British have no fleet whatsoever, and the American fleet has been defeated. Um, the Allies will be utterly destroyed to the last unit eventually. I don't know how you guys play that out. Um, what if that'd be a weird scenario, like where if you're playing global 40, and the war in Europe is like back and forth, and then the Japanese player just smashes the Allies in on the Western map. Uh, I mean, like I don't know what the customary. I don't think I've seen that happen before. I haven't played too many opposed global 40s. Um, yeah, see, that's a big American Navy. However, it's broken into two spots, and I am still bigger. And it's not enough to take Japan. So, what is going to happen? I might smash Guam and destroy two bombers there. Anzacs can be sneaky in the south too. Like their whole purpose in this game seems to be uh, sneaking in and retaking maybe Java or something like that, like or mopping up a vacated island. I don't know. I don't have the answers for the Anzacs. I'm not sure what how you guys play them aggressively or just concentrate on protecting what little you do have. This is going to be the end of China here. Good. Killed two American bombers on Guam. Wow, that was costly. Costly. Excuse me. Um, like I said before, you might find yourself in this position where uh, one attack bomber may not hurt if it means kissing the Chinese goodbye. I still want to have some tanks. These of course, are headed to India now. And I think, honestly, time is running out for the Allies. Uh, America's going to have to make a decision here because everything now on the mainland is headed towards India. I can build more stuff than they can, and the Anzacs aren't strong enough to really relieve the British in any meaningful sense. Um, so this is going to come to a head soon here. America will have to. They have 9 aircraft carriers, which is one more than me. However, they do not have their aircraft deployed in such a way as to cover all those carriers. So this is, yeah, it's the right time. Usually, like, I'm not sure why they did that. That was a mistake, though. Like I said before, a carrier is only a carrier if it's fully equipped with fighters, and they have only, I don't know, 70% of their navy in that one spot. So I attack. I have, notice how I have 8 submarines though, right? Most people won't have that. They ignore submarines. So I could soak 8 hits here. Never mind my battleship. Both of them. But we're going to do subs first. His aircraft carriers are all lit up. And see, that's the problem of having your main body commingled with a naval strike group. Like, you can be smoked like that too. So what's left for the Americans is now dispersed and scattered. That's a huge setback for the Allies. That's, I mean, at this point, I'm just going to fast forward here so we can... I fast forwarded a couple turns. You can see the Anzacs snuck in and took some of the big islands. That is acceptable temporarily as long as this happens. And you can see it didn't take me very long to get 15 mechanized infantry down to India just from a factory in Manchuria. Doesn't take long if you concentrate on those. So India will be overwhelmed. That whole section of the map is taken care of. The Americans suffered a huge defeat. Now, didn't eradicate their navy, but it has to run until it can be reformed. But in the meantime, what has happened? Well, nothing short of losing India and more islands and probably parts of Australia. So yeah, this is the slow burn methodology on display for you as Japan. Like I said, it doesn't have the panache and pizzazz and let's say prestige of the more spectacular, risky. Oh, I just took India in 6 turns or 5 turns or whatever. I just don't see how you can do that easily without risking the integrity of your navy, which can then, and by that I mean like let's be clear, your naval aviators, which were so valuable to the Japanese in real life. If they're squandered over land, then the Americans will just pounce on your navy and then set the entire Japanese war effort into a tailspin. So I just don't allow that to happen. And like I said before, like, this way to play is less stressful. Like, I barely have to try to calculate odds in my head. Like, you can just sort of see that you're breaking up what needs to be accomplished into sort of manageable packets where you can clearly see that you're overwhelming the opponent in set piece engagements in sequence, and you really don't have to sweat much with this style. I included this part here. Like, look at this is funny. The Americans, like, and this is an example of lazy, desperate spending on the Americans, and you see this. Like, this is something you do see in real life too. You fall behind, and they'll collect a ton of strategic bombers in a location and see one of my bombers. I guess it was the Anzacs that did it. And this is the type of thing that can happen, right? That's a painful lesson. Like, that has happened to everybody. At least, it should happen once, and then you learn your lesson too. Like, of course, it's happened to me too. But you could see, skipping ahead here. Dutch East or Dutch New Guinea is going to go down. Going to take back the big islands there, Java, Sumatra. There's nothing the Anzacs can do to stop me at this point. A lot of the other minor Pacific islands are gone too, while the Americans scramble to reform their navy. By turn 14, this is basically a wrap. You should be talking to the American player, discussing terms for their surrender. Yeah, and nothing's going to work here. Yes, and like you can see, like America can build a ton of aircraft, and in theory, they can keep rebuilding their navy, but that takes time. And then while they're doing that, I mean, you're finally liquidating Australia, and you're going to be even stronger. 72 now is how much money I have. After, what's Australia's worth? It's probably worth maybe 10. So, yeah. I mean, you can play this out, but what's the point? I'm interested if you leave a comment and tell me, like, how your last live opposed game of Global 1940 went. I love stories like that. I like. I mean, I wish I could play this opposed. I don't. I just don't know anyone currently that likes A enough to run one of these massive battles with. I was like involved in that type of stuff when I was in college, and that's many years ago. So I kind of have to just settle for the very occasional um, smaller game of A&A. But I'm always I'm just completely blown away by some of the setups that I see online, like on YouTube, like dudes with like painted ships, and oh man, I'm so jealous. Like one of the awesomest ones I saw was actually oh, what was it? I think it was a 41 version, and like he had Japanese navy fighters, like the correct like white paint job, but the planes over land had like the camo schemes and everything. I was like, oh, that's so wicked. But yeah, I mean, this is over. I don't care what um, at this point. It doesn't matter what the Anzacs, whatever they have, will be whittled away. whittled away, and I just don't think you can play in such a way as to not give the Americans breathing room to reform any type of counterattack with their name. I mean, they got to assemble strike groups, and with all their planes dispersed, and like they're going to be running. They're not going to be. They're not going to be able to mount any type of offense. Not one that can reverse the momentum at this point. If you see this, if you look on the map here and see something like this in a live game, it's over. Anyway, I really enjoyed making this video, and I hope maybe this video helps any new player of Japan in a game of Global 1940. Thanks for watching. Stay tuned for more content coming soon.